In 1975, Chrysler was again experiencing financial hardship as sales of its full-size C-bodies were not doing very well. However, for the 1975 model year, the team at Chrysler came up with a genuine hit for the company in the malaise-era, the Cordoba. Prior to the Cordoba, Chrysler was quite reticent to enter the small car field with anything aside from its Plymouth or Dodge nameplates. In fact, in some of the earlier 1960s catalogs, Chrysler specifically stated that there would never be a, quote, junior edition car. However, times had materially changed, especially after the OPEC embargo of late 1973. And Chrysler thought it was time to enter this particular personal luxury market for 1975. The thought was, instead of introducing this car as a Plymouth or Dodge, to push it upmarket to help Chrysler get some incremental profitability to help offset the poor sales of the rest of the lineup. Amazingly, it ended up working, and working quite well, with the car selling 150,000 units in its first year, and with the highest production year being 1977, where 183,000 units were sold. In fact, the Cordoba proved so popular that during this mid-1970s time period, roughly half of Chrysler Division's production was the Cordoba, all of which were produced in Chrysler's Windsor, Ontario facility. While Chrysler touted the Cordoba as being its new entry, it really rode atop a familiar B-body architecture that dated back to 1962 when it was introduced in the Plymouth and Dodge lineup as their full-size cars before Dodge panicked given the relatively small size of the car compared to General Motors and Ford offerings, and introduced the 880, which was basically a warmed-over New Yorker. Thus, the Cordoba rode atop a 115-inch wheelbase, had an overall length of 215 inches and a width of 77 inches. It was also a relatively low car, with its height topping just over 52.5 inches. When introduced, it was Chrysler's hope that this model would help the company compete against other vehicles like the Mercury Cougar, Buick Regal, and Oldsmobile Cutlass. While the company obviously settled on the Cordoba name in the end, other names including Murata, Premier, and Sebring, as well as Grand Era, were also associated with the Cordoba, and all of them ended up being used on future Chrysler products, aside from the latter. And in fact, the Cordoba name was a resurrection of a trim level from the 1970 Chrysler Newport. For the first several years of production, more specifically the 1975 to 77 model years, the Cordoba wore a front end with single round headlights with turn signals inset from them and a vertically oriented grille similar to the full-size Chryslers of the time. While the Cordoba was a new car, the front end certainly looks familiar, and it's hard to exactly place what the designer's inspiration was. Perhaps it was the 1973 Monte Carlo that had similar singular round headlights, albeit much more surfacing on the sides of the vehicle. But the Monte Carlo did also have the opera window graphic that the Cordoba employed. However, another potential source of inspiration might have been the 1968 Jaguar XJ, which also has a distinctly similar front end, albeit with a nose that slopes much further forward than the Cordoba's relatively flat front end. Out back, the Cordoba had a single taillight on each side in a relatively blocky shape, and a deck lid that bears a passing resemblance to that of the 1971 and 72 Eldorado with its forms. This overall shape would continue on for the 1975 to 1977 model years relatively unchanged until 1978 when the Cordoba's front end was redesigned to have quad rectangular style headlamps, which were all the rage of the era, and the grille went from having a relatively vertical theme to a more fine mesh texture that had rectangles within rectangles to give it some depth. The rear end styling was also revised, giving the taillights more of a sloped profile as opposed to being relatively flat on the prior generations. For the 1979 model year, the Cordoba got a different grille up front, very similar to the grille texture that Cadillac changed the Seville's grille to in 1977 after the egg crate theme that was on the 1976 Seville. And while customers no doubt found the exterior appealing, Chrysler really took special pains to tout its interior appointments on the Cordoba, including having spokesperson Ricardo Montalban talk extensively about the rich Corinthian leather in its advertising campaigns. The fact that no such thing as Corinthian leather exists really didn't matter to the marketers, who used this new nomenclature to their advantage. Interestingly, though it depicts the bucket leather seats, the 1975 Chrysler Cordoba brochure does not talk about Corinthian leather. It's not until 1976 that Chrysler renamed this leather with a trademark that's so indelibly etched into the brains of many individuals who watched the Ricardo Montalban ads for the Cordoba in the 1970s. Let's take a quick listen to one of the most memorable ad campaigns from the malaise era of American automobiles.
I know my own needs, and what I need from an automobile, I know I get from this new Cordoba. I could ask for nothing beyond the quality of Cordoba's workmanship, the tastefulness of its appearance. I request nothing beyond the thickly cushioned luxury of seats available even in soft Corinthian leather. Yet it is on the highway where Cordoba best answers my demands. I have much more in this small Chrysler than great comfort at a most pleasant price. I have great confidence, for which there can be no price. In Cordoba, I have what I need.
Well, Ricardo minimally had what he needed from the Cordoba, and overall the car was a huge sales success for the Chrysler division, which is quite remarkable considering, as previously mentioned, it was basically a warmed-over 1962 Dodge and Plymouth underneath, with Chrysler's standard torsion-air ride with longitudinally mounted torsion bars up front and leaf spring rear suspension. And while it was effectively a 62 Plymouth and Dodge underneath, Chrysler did truthfully put in quite a bit of effort to reduce overall road noise on these vehicles to make them quite pleasant when driving on the inside. Having driven a number of Cordobas over the years, if you do end up buying one, I think what you can expect from the car is that it's going to feel a bit firmer, have tighter steering, and be a little bit noisier on the inside than contemporaneous GM and Ford vehicles. However, it is quite pleasant. The interiors are plush, the seats are comfortable, and the overall car, in spite of its humble beginnings, is a relatively fun car to drive, especially if you are able to find one equipped with either the 360 cubic inch or 400 cubic inch engine under hood. The 318 V8 is highly reliable and a Chrysler workhorse. However, the Cordoba is a relatively heavy car, and it takes quite a bit for the 318 V8 to move it around. And if you're looking for an especially special Cordoba, check out one of the 1979 models with the special appearance package that resembled the Seville Elegante paint scheme, or the 1979 Chrysler 300, which was a trim package offered on the Cordoba, coupled with a standard 360 cubic inch V8 engine. Hope you enjoyed this video on the Chrysler Cordoba. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, take care. Thanks again for watching this video on the Chrysler Cordoba. If you enjoyed it, please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe, as that helps the YouTube algorithm serve it up to more people like you. Until next time, be sure to check out the video thumbnails at bottom left and bottom right. And if you enjoy these videos, be sure to hit the super thanks button, which is the heart-shaped icon with a $sign in it at the bottom right of your video browser. Thanks again for watching. Until next time, take care.